Who was Jeffrey Epstein really, and what was he actually working on? Because he wasn't just a finance guy. Follow me down the rabbit hole about why Epstein was into science. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about Jeffrey Epstein and all his science slash education ties. It really doesn't make any sense the amount of money he was putting towards universities, certain scientists, education just in general. Like, okay, maybe he was like a good guy, but we already know that he wasn't a good guy. So there's got to be something about this science thing that we need to know. Before we jump in, of course, I'd love to thank our sponsors. So thank you, Wise Wolf Gold, for sponsoring my podcast. Guys, if you want gold and silver delivered straight to your front door for as little as $50 a week, go to rabbithole.gold right now. It's so simple, comes every single month. It's a subscription, and it's probably the cheapest that you'll find gold and silver, especially delivered like this. Crazy. Rabbithole.gold right now. Let's dive in. Who is Epstein? We have always been told that he was this financier and that's how he was connected to all these people. And that feels like a totally reasonable explanation. If he is involved in finance, then that would give him access to wealthy people and everything comes down to money. But why then was he so interested in science? This question was actually asked by Eric Weinstein. Eric is a mathematician, economist, and speaks on things within the science community pretty often. He is also the managing director at Thiel Capital. So I listened to this interview on Diary of a CEO, and he touched on the Epstein stuff, but only for like a brief second. He also kind of touched on like physics and how physicists don't have like the right to free speech. They have to keep a lot of things quiet, which is a episode all in itself, and that maybe we can address that a little bit in this episode as well, I guess. But physicists are not allowed to just like be out talking about everything they know, which I think is very interesting. I'm not a physicist. I'd love to talk to one. So if any of you know. But Eric brought up the fact that we are told over and over again that Epstein is just this disgraced financier. But why then was he visiting the Harvard math department like on a regular basis? Why did he host a physics conference on his island? Why did he have an 8,000-acre ranch in New Mexico that he offered up as a lab and place to run experiments? Lots of questions. Let's first talk about the foundation, which funded most of the things. So, in my research, I found that he had several different foundations. A lot of the money was coming out of the Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation. However, I guess there was like a Greater American Foundation and like an expanded education foundation. I don't know. I didn't write those down. I couldn't find a whole lot of information about those. I did find the Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation. It was founded in 2000 by Epstein. The point of this foundation was to sponsor cutting edge science around the world. The foundation directly funded university departments, individual scientists, and experiments in a wide range of subjects from quantum physics, evolutionary biology and theoretical mathematics to computer intelligence and neuroscience. He was all over the board in the funding of the different sciences. The foundation also sponsored symposiums and conferences to further the exchange of original research and frontier science. Jeffrey Epstein Science focused heavily in the medical field on genetic engineering. Officially, they were focusing on cancer, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease, although unofficially, I think that they were really looking into genetics as well. Like how to create the perfect genetics. Obviously, they're genetic engineering, but how to create perfect genetics to create a more perfect human race. Unofficially, of course. In 2003, the foundation established the program for Evolutionary Dynamics, or PED, at Harvard University. Evolutionary dynamics is the study of the mathematical principles according to which biological organisms, as well as cultural ideas and other systems, evolve or have evolved. The field uses mathematical models to understand the process of evolution, typically focusing on how the frequencies of different traits or genotypes change over time within populations. This program was under the direction of Martin Nowak. This guy's very important. Very huge supporter of Epstein. They were like really good friends, Martin Nowak and Jeffrey Epstein. So, Nowak is an Austrian-born professor of math and biology. He is also a researcher in evolutionary dynamics, dipping into evolutionary theory and viral dynamics. He worked at Oxford and Princeton before being recruited to Harvard in 2003 for the program for evolutionary dynamics. Like he was literally brought to Harvard for PED. He ran the program from 2003 to 2020. Throughout the time, he would often let Epstein use his private office in the PED building. And it's never said really like why he was using the office, but it's assumed that it was to have sex with some of the girls that were in the program. Martin is often referred to as Epstein's favorite scientist. He put a lot of money, a lot of time into Martin. I was wondering how Epstein picked Martin to be the head of this program, or like if he was the person that picked him. But then I remembered in the 1980s, Epstein had an Austrian passport. So that connection could go all the way back there, or maybe Epstein wasn't even the person that picked him. I just don't understand why Epstein would put this much money into the program without picking the scientist, especially later when we get into individual scientists he backed. It seemed more like he was about the person. I mean, yes, also the science, but the person performing the science. Anyway, the program initially received a $30 million grant from Epstein and then an additional 6.5 million over the next 3 years. Harvard didn't allow any more donations after Epstein was convicted in 2008, so the last donation they got was in 2007. Although, if they were receiving donations for the program from a different source, how could they verify that Epstein wasn't still behind it? Because he had other foundations that weren't Jeffrey Epstein Foundation. They were just like Enhanced Education or whatever name they had. Either way, PED provided groundbreaking research in the evolution of genes, viruses, and cancer cells. They also found insightful information into the origins of life from RNA monomer sequences. Outside of Harvard, several other universities were receiving money from the Jeffrey Epstein Six Foundation. Princeton, Columbia, New York University, Cornell, Pepperdine, Ohio State, Stanford, UCLA, the Santa Fe Institute, Rockefeller University, and Pennsylvania University. He was involved in the Theoretical Biology Initiative at the Institute for Advanced Study, the Quantum Gravity Program at the University of Pennsylvania, sat on the Mind, Brain, and Behavior Advisory Committee at Harvard, and was a member of the EDGE community. We're going to get into EDGE a little bit more when we talk about John Brockman, but EDGE is an internationally academic group of thinkers and achievers. Very Bohemian Grove. Some individuals that were sponsored by the foundation include Gerald Eldman. He was a biologist who shared the 1972 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with Rodney Robert Porter on the immune system. Epstein was very connected to the Rockefeller University and the Rockefeller family, while Gerald got his PhD at Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. And it's also interesting to me that the Rockefellers were very interested in medical, like their entire family line. We talked about the Rockefellers last year, sometime like a year and a half ago. John D. Rockefeller started medical schools and helped with getting rid of like holistic medicine and putting in like more like Western medicine. So like they have their hand in the medical industry. They've always had their hand in the medical industry. Of course, they have their own university, Rockefeller University. They have Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research. That's where Gerald got his PhD. But Epstein's also like weirdly into medical research. Makes me wonder if like David Rockefeller and Jeffrey Epstein were really good friends. I haven't found that yet, but I'm curious about that. Later in Gerald's career, his most notable accomplishment is for his theory of consciousness. He also had a theory of neuronal group selection known as neural Darwinism, as well as founding and directing the Neurosciences Institute. Murray Gell-Mann, a theoretical physicist, recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics, author, and Santa Fe Institute professor slash co-founder. He is one of today's most prominent scientists, and he comes up a couple times. So, yes, he was specifically funded by Epstein, but also later on he attends the Epstein conference at his island. And Epstein's very much involved in the Santa Fe Institute. That's also where his 8,000-acre ranch is. So Murray Gell-Mann is doing a lot of weird things with Epstein potentially on that ranch in Santa Fe. Eric Lander was funded by Epstein, a mathematician and geneticist who is a professor of biology at MIT and a professor of systems biology at Harvard Medical School. He founded the Whitehead Institute Center for Genome Research, was a principal leader of the Human Genome Project, was the founding director of the Broad Institute, and was the science advisor to the president for both Obama and Biden. So this guy has a lot of ties. George Church was funded by Epstein. He is a leading expert in human genetics and biotechnology. He is a geneticist, molecular engineer, chemist, serial entrepreneur, and known for his work, obviously, in genetics and synthetic biology. He is a professor at Harvard Medical School, Harvard University, and MIT. Harvard Medical School and Harvard University being separate entities in this instance. Like he does lectures for both. Stephen Hawking was also sponsored by Jeffrey Epstein, a theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and director of research at the Center for Theoretical Cosmology. He was also a professor of mathematics at Cambridge. In 1974, Hawking spent a year at the California Institute of Technology. And I only mention this because several professors from there end up attending the conference on Epstein's Island in 2011. So it's just interesting to me that I don't, maybe they just randomly cross paths, but I thought it was worth mentioning. I mean, that could have happened with any of these people. Like at any point, been like, oh, like maybe they were just had a fundraiser together and got pictured together. It's just really convenient to me that like all these people knew Epstein or were in his same circle. Kip Thorne, theoretical physicist and writer who has contributed greatly to the conversations of gravitational physics and astrophysics. He is also the recipient of the 2017 Nobel Prize in Physics. He was good friends with Stephen Hawking and was a professor of theoretical physics at Caltech until 2009, which might be where him and Stephen Hawking met. Marvin Minsky, a cognitive and computer scientist who focused on AI, he attended Harvard and Princeton to get his degrees, which we know that Epstein has ties to both Harvard and Princeton. He was on the MIT faculty from 1958 until his death in 2016, and he co-founded MIT's AI laboratory. Lawrence Cross, this guy and Epstein go way back. They're like best friends. He is a theoretical physicist who also had interests in the interface between elementary particle physics and cosmology. Most recently, he worked as a foundation professor in the School of Earth and Space Exploration and Physics Department and inaugural director of the Origins Initiative at Arizona State University. By the way, it was Epstein's money that got the Origins Initiative up and running. So not only was Epstein like funding Lawrence himself, he was also funding the Origins Initiative, which was run by Lawrence. Although they also received up to $2 million in personal gifts from Leon Black and his wife, Deborah. We will get so far deep into Leon Black in the next episode when we do all the connections. But just for context, he was an executive at BlackRock, just so we all know kind of who this guy is. Lawrence has also worked at Harvard, Yale, Case Western Reserve University, board of sponsors of the Bulletin of the Sciences, and helped to found Science Debate. He also said, quote, "I don't feel tarnished in any way by my relationship with Jeffrey. I feel raised by it," which I think is a weird thing to say. He said that in 2011. In 2018, the Origins Initiative was shut down in the aftermath of Lawrence's own sexual harassment accusations. So, super good guy. Great guy. Of course, like birds of a feather fly together, right? Lee Smolin, a theoretical physicist, faculty member at the Perimeter Institute of Theoretical Physics, and professor of physics at the University of Waterloo. He focuses on quantum gravity theory, and he also went to graduate school at Harvard. Again, just mentioning it because maybe it means something. Gregory Benford, a science fiction author and astrophysicist. He was a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of California, Irvine. He also wrote the sci-fi series Galactic Center Saga and wrote a story about computer viruses called The Scarred Man. Gerard 't Hooft, theoretical physicist, professor at Utrecht University, and Nobel Prize winner in physics in 1999. His work focuses on gauge theory, black holes, quantum gravity, and fundamental aspects of quantum mechanics. Also, by the way, this guy had a fellowship at CERN. He made calculations that proved the commonly accepted Yang-Mills theory was not 100% accurate, and then also presented that at a conference in Marseilles in 1972. However, he did not publish his findings. Instead, they were published by Hugh David Pulitzer, David Gross, and Frank Wilczek, which led to the three of them earning the 2004 Nobel Prize in Physics. David Gross and Frank Wilczek, which we will get into in just a second, they were also financially backed by Epstein. I didn't find that Hugh David Pulitzer was financially backed by Epstein, but that doesn't mean it's not true. That just means I couldn't find it. If he's funding the other two, all three of them won the Nobel Prize in physics. He probably did receive some money as well. David Gross is a theoretical physicist and string theorist. He is also a professor at the Kavli Institute for Theoretical Physics of the University of California, Santa Barbara, and he got his bachelor's and master's at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I mention that because of Robert Maxwell, not necessarily Jeffrey Epstein. And Frank Wilczek, also a theoretical physicist, a mathematician, and a physics professor at MIT. He's also a founding director of T.D. Lee Institute, a chief scientist at the Wilczek Quantum Center, Shanghai Jiao Tong University, distinguished professor at Arizona State University during February and March, not all the time, I guess, and full professor at Stockholm University. So these are the people that I could find that he was like actually giving money to fund their science. To me, I thought it was very interesting that most of them were physicists. Actually, I think all of them were physicists. I mean, some of them dabbled in other things, but there was like, what do the physicists know? I should go to a university and talk to a physicist just to be like, why would Epstein be interested in a bunch of physicists, you know? I mean, he's interested in like AI, computer science, genetics, things like that, but a lot of physics. Outside of sponsoring these individual scientists, he also hosted a couple conferences. In 2006, there was a conference on gravity hosted by Lawrence Krauss in the Virgin Islands called Confronting Gravity, a workshop to explore fundamental questions in physics and cosmology. So this conference was hosted on St. Thomas, but many of the physicists were actually pictured on Epstein's island during the same time. Like they went to St. Thomas for the conference, but then like the ones that wanted to keep partying, they went to Epstein Island. This conference was attended by Stephen Hawking, who was one of those confirmed pictures on the island. 22 physicists attended the conference where they workshopped things like gravitational waves, black holes, quantum mechanics, and the nature of the universe. Along with Lawrence Krauss, the host, and Stephen Hawking, three Nobel Prize winning physicians were in attendance. We've already talked about them: Gerard 't Hooft, David Gross, and Frank Wilczek, all of whom we know were funded by Epstein. This conference was sponsored by the J. Epstein Virgin Islands Foundation and the Center for Education and Research in Cosmology and Astrophysics at Case Western Reserve University, which is where Lawrence was working at the time. What I thought was really weird, they sent invitations to any 10th through 12th graders who would like to attend from the three high schools that were on the island. However, the conference was not open to the public. Like you needed an invite to come, but they extended this invite to any teenagers, 10th through 12th graders that would like to attend. That's not weird, especially when we know that like this guy's a pedophile. And Lawrence Krauss was a pedophile too. The director of the Epstein Foundation said of the event, quote, Jeffrey Epstein believes in education, and since this is his home, it was especially important for the people of the Virgin Islands to be able to participate in the experience of having Nobel Prize winners in the Virgin Islands. Although the conference is a private gathering of minds, Jeffrey was interested also in doing public outreach, especially to the schools, end quote. Lawrence was used to giving speeches at high schools anyway because he had been doing so in the months leading up to this conference. Like with 7 months leading up to this conference, he was giving speeches at high schools in Tokyo, Singapore, Canada, and the United States, which gives him access to children. Hate that for them. Ugh, disgusting. A couple years later, the Mindshift conference took place on Epstein Island in January of 2011. This conference was hosted by Epstein and Al Seckel and was to assemble a diverse and eclectic group of exceptional thinkers to discuss topics ranging from AI to complexity theory. They were talking about theoretical physics, evolutionary biology, cognitive neuroscience, minimally invasive surgery, encryption and decryption, new financial systems and methods, emerging technologies, genetics, and so much more. It's actually really weird, like just how broad this conference was. Some confirmed attendees from this conference were obviously Al Seckel, who co-hosted the conference with Epstein. He is an illusionist, cognitive neuroscientist, and author. What a weird combination of things. Also, we're going to get into him being an illusionist and also the other magicians that Epstein surrounded himself with in next week's episode. Murray Gell-Mann came to this conference. He is a theoretical physicist, a recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics, author, and Santa Fe Institute professor, as well as co-founder. And he is one of today's most prominent scientists, if you forgot from earlier. Christoph Koch, professor of cognitive science at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, but he also studied physics and AI. He is very interested in finding out how consciousness arises out of the brain. Those are his words from his website, not my words. Very, very odd, actually, very specific. Frances Arnold, a professor of chemical engineering and biochemistry at Caltech. She is specifically studying protein engineering, which protein literally builds our bodies, directed evolution, biocatalysts, biological circuit design, and bioenergy. Gerald Sussman, professor of electrical engineering at MIT. He had been involved in AI research at MIT since 1964. He also co-authored the introductory computer science textbook used at MIT. Like they literally still use it today. So then I looked into that a little bit more because I was like, I wonder who prints that. Is it the printing company that Robert Maxwell used to own? It's not. MIT owns their own like little printing company. So it's all printed like in-house. Catherine Moore started as an engineer developing alternative energy vehicles and high altitude aircraft. Then she changed careers and went to medical school. So she invented the lap cap, which makes laparoscopic surgeries a lot safer. She is the director of medical research at Intuitive Surgical Incorporated and works at Stanford School of Medicine. Leonard Lodno, a physicist and author at Caltech, he co-authored a book with Stephen Hawking. Most of his books are on popular science, but he did write a screenplay for the film Beyond the Horizon, which was in production. I actually couldn't find the movie. So either it's currently in production right now and like there's just nothing out about it, or they scrapped it altogether. But he also was a screenwriter on the TV series Star Trek: The Next Generation and MacGyver. So this guy like writes fiction for a living. Reichert von Wolfschild, he works in complex platform software architecture, lossless compression technology, multi-point real-time communication, and encryption. So he was the chief software architect, CTO, and co-founder of QTask, an IT company who worked with companies such as Atari, DreamWorks, Mattel, Time Warner, Walt Disney, Washington Post, Apple, Microsoft, and many others. However, QTask is no longer around. Dan Dubno, the executive director of the Hourglass Initiative, a nonprofit that engages in the scientific community, founder of Gadget Off, which is an event to show off new gadgets, and Emmy Award-winning television producer and correspondent. So he's done a variety of things as well. I feel like all these people had like multiple careers in very different fields. So he was the guy that coordinated the special events unit coverage of national and international stories at CBS. He holds the patent for the touch table food service ordering system and mentors high schoolers in robotics, which again just feels weird to me when you are connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Pablos Holman a futurist, inventor, security expert, and notorious hacker. He works on inventions like a fission reactor powered by nuclear waste, a machine to stop hurricanes or guide them. No, it doesn't say that. Just he's allegedly to stop hurricanes, a system to reverse global warming, and tools to help eradicate malaria, which is also something that Bill Gates is passionate about. So it makes me wonder, like, do those two work hand in hand? Maybe. Who knows? Ron Reisman, a computer engineer and scientist who works for NASA at the Ames Research Center. He was also the CTO at Navi Systems. He held a research position at the Dolphin Research Center and the University of Pennsylvania Primate Research Facility, which I talked about this a little bit when I went on Conspiracy Chaos. So this guy, or maybe it was I've been on a lot of different podcasts lately. We're not allowed to talk to dolphins anymore. Like we're talk to dolphins. We're not allowed to have like a relationship with dolphins. So it makes me wonder, like, this guy literally worked at a dolphin research center. What does he know about the dolphins that like we're not allowed to know? No, I talked about this on the Daily Conspiracy podcast. Anyway, the next person that attended the conference was Brock Pierce, entrepreneur, creator of virtual currencies and goods, founder of Internet Gaming Entertainment, chairman and president of Revenue Apex, and co-founder of Tether. He was also a child actor in the Disney films The Mighty Ducks, D2, The Mighty Ducks, and First Kid, which I watched all of those when I was a kid. Paul Kirkus was in attendance. He is a software engineer. I couldn't find actually very much about him on the internet. There are a couple people on the internet with the same name, but I didn't know who was who, so it's kind of like, okay, I don't want to give you all the wrong information. And it's not like these people are like advertising that they went to this conference. So, all I know, he's a software engineer. Those are the people that are confirmed to be at the conference. There are other scientists and academics that have been associated with Epstein publicly, but that we haven't really covered. So let's go over those guys right now. John Brockman, we talked about him a little bit earlier. He's a New York literary agent who specializes in science and technology. He was the guy that would introduce Epstein to famous scientists. He knew everybody because he was the publisher, editor, not really the founder, but definitely worked really high up at edge.org, or just like Edge is what we called it. We talked about this just a little bit earlier. It's described as an intellectual club. Edge puts a number of billion Edge puts on a number of billionaire dinners every year, which brings together scientists, artists, philosophers, tech titans, and Wall Street's super wealthy people, which is how Epstein attended one of these parties. Epstein would then talk to John and be like, who do I need to know? And he would meet a bunch of scientists in that world. Epstein donated $50,000 to Edge in 2007, right after the New York Times published a story about him getting preferential treatment in the face of the allegations that he was up against. In turn, Edge published Epstein's response to their annual question. So they always put up a question, whoever can respond to it, but they published his response. That year, 2008, the question was, what have you changed your mind about? His response was, the question presupposes a well-defined you as an implied ability that is under your control to change your mind. He put all these things in quotes. The you, I now believe, is distributed amongst others, family, friends, in hierarchical structures, i.e., suicide bombers believe their sacrifice is for the other parts of their you. The question carries with it an intention that I believe is out of one's control. My mind changed as a result of its interaction with its environment. Why? Because it is part of it. Literally, the answer doesn't even make that much sense. Like, what did you change your mind about? But he didn't actually say what he changed his mind about. His funding of Edge continued until at least 2014. A lot of people like kind of get mad about the funding after he got out of jail because they're like, he was convicted. He's like convicted of sex crimes. You should just leave this guy alone. A lot of people would still take money, but then eventually they were like, oh, we're sorry that we took Jeffrey Epstein's money. Robert Trivers received money from Epstein. He is an evolutionary biologist and pioneer in sociobiology. He was a professor at Rutgers University until 2017. He received $40,000 in 2015 from Epstein to study knee symmetry and sprinting ability in Jamaican athletes. Which makes me wonder, like, was he studying this because he wants the perfect knees and the perfect sprinting ability in the perfect specimen that he's trying to create? And that wasn't the first donation received by Epstein. He also donated $25,000 in 2010 to Trivers Biosocial Research Foundation. Trivers defended Epstein after his initial arrest in 2008. Jean-Francois Garapi. I probably said his last name wrong. It's French. He was a postdoctoral researcher in neuroscience at Duke University in 2014. That's when his nonprofit, Neuro.tv, received $25,000 from Epstein to make a series of YouTube interviews with experts in psychology, neuroscience, and philosophy. He actually said in an interview that he would take money from the devil if it meant that he could further science. So this guy, he's like, I don't have any qualms taking money from Jeffrey Epstein. I got to do good work in the science community as he saw it. After receiving money for the YouTube series, he petitioned Epstein for money to finance his book, The Revolutionary Phenotype. Apparently, Epstein didn't give him the money, though. Seth Lloyd is an MIT physicist and self-described quantum mechanic. He met Epstein at a dinner organized by John Brockman, probably through Edge. Between 2008 and 2017, Lloyd acknowledged funding from Epstein in 17 scientific papers he published and accepted 2 grants from him. Joy Ito, a venture capitalist and director of the MIT Media Lab, received funding for his lab from Epstein. He met Epstein at a meal with a trusted friend, so I'm wondering if that friend was John Brockman. And the MIT Media Lab is a research hub for robotics and digital media. This plays a important part. We're going to get into just how much money was received by MIT for this lab. Ben Gortzel is an AI researcher and thanked Epstein in his technical volume for his visionary funding, stating that Epstein was helping to support the OpenCog Hong Kong project. OpenCog, led by Ben, was founded in 2008 and developed software for AI. According to the website, Epstein also helped to launch the OpenCog lab in Ethiopia. Josh Shabak, who has worked at Martin Nowak's Harvard program for Evolutionary Dynamics, which we talked about way at the beginning of the episode, and the MIT Media Lab, acknowledged the Epstein Foundation for their support in his AI research. He is currently the vice president for research at the AI Foundation. Ira Lamster, former dean of the Columbia University College of Dental Medicine, accepted $100,000 from Epstein to research whether dentists could help in the early diagnosis of diabetes. Again, this made me wonder, like, what the heck? Why do you need to know that? But is he trying to create the perfect specimen? Or are the people that he's working for trying to create the perfect specimen? Doris Germain is a cancer researcher at the Icahn School of Medicine in New York City. She received a grant from Epstein to study breast cancer. MIT acknowledged that they received a total of $800,000, all of which went to either Joy Ito or the Media Lab. So he was funding this Media Lab heavily. As far as Harvard University, after his conviction, no donations have been found from Epstein to Harvard. But before that, just in 2007, $636,000 was donated to Harvard. Who knows how much in the years prior to that? But we know that he had ties to the school that runs super, super deep. I mean, literally, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz was his criminal defense attorney. And he sat on the advisory board of the Harvard Society of Mind, Brain, and Behavior. And this dude wore Harvard attire all the time, which, not a smoking gun. I get it. I could go down and buy like a shirt that says Harvard on it and wear it. But like so much. And in so many different interviews, Harvard is mentioned as if he went to Harvard, but he did not. The Santa Fe Institute is another big one. So this institute was co-founded by Murray Gell-Mann, who we already know has deep ties with Epstein. Like, they run deep. They received $25,000 from him in 2010, but Gell-Mann thanked Epstein for his donations to the institute in his 1995 book. So that means that there are more donations than just this one from 2010. We just don't know how much they were, when they came, how how long he had been donating to the Santa Fe Institute. But again, we do know, we're going to get into the ranch in just a minute, that the ranch was very near. The University of Arizona received $50,000 in 2017. They used this money to support a scientific conference on consciousness. Humanity Plus, which was the guise of the World Transhumanist Association, received $20,000 in 2010. Transhumanism is a philosophical and intellectual movement that advocates the enhancement of the human condition by developing and making widely available new and future technologies that can greatly enhance longevity, cognition, and well being. Which honestly, I feel like I could do an entire episode just on transhumanism. I won't do it right this second. We'll do it in the future. But Epstein was very interested in it. Machine Intelligence Research Institute, who is known as the Singularity Institute for Artificial Intelligence, received $50,000 in 2009. Again, any of these entities could have received money from other foundations associated with Epstein or in other years besides what I'm mentioning here. These are just the years and the amounts that I could find. Nautilus Think, which promotes science education and the literary arts and publishes an online science magazine, received $25,000 in 2017. And the University of British Columbia received $25,000 from Epstein. I'm not exactly sure why he donated to them. We just know that he did. What it went to, not sure. So then I was like, okay, why does he support science so much? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's commonly stated and accepted that Epstein loved science and math, which is why he was a teacher in his younger years. And everyone's like, oh, he was a teacher, he was a science teacher. So of course he's just like going back to his roots. But it just like doesn't fully make a lot of sense to me. Like there's a lot of things that we used to do in our past lives that we just like move on from. So like, yeah, you like science. You like science enough to support every theoretical physicist in the world. That's not true. That's obviously an exaggeration. But I'm just saying, like, it just feels really convenient. So, according to Epstein's blog from when he was blogging way back in the day, it says, quote, I am interested in people who are not averse to risk taking, and I may choose to support some original and powerful mavericks and others who may work outside of the conventional scientific mainstream, end quote. He was especially interested in evolutionary biology, which I kind of mentioned a little bit, and he said on this, quote, evolutionary biology holds promise in advancing our knowledge of the dynamics of infectious diseases and cancer genetics, as well as alternative forms of energy. While some people who are ignorant of the subject are perhaps frightened or threatened by it, and therefore opposed to it, the potential of evolution, especially microevolution, has been fundamental to many social improvements in the century, and it promises to be profoundly important to biomedical technology in the next generation, specifically in drug development and in biotechnology. End quote. Those are his words. That's what he typed on his blog. I think it was from like jeffreyepstein.com. I don't know. I found this website that has all this old Jeffrey Epstein website stuff, that stuff you can't find anymore. But he's definitely like specifically drug development and biotechnology. They're looking into like how to make superhumans, I feel like. But he wasn't just interested in science, he was interested in art as well because he supported Project Zero because of his belief that arts improved education. Project Zero's mission is to understand and nurture human potentials such as learning, thinking, ethics, intelligence, and creativity in all human beings. They believe that people can learn better as they express themselves through art. Thinking and learning can be made visual by drawing, painting, and dancing. So this project was started at the Harvard Graduate School of Education in 1967. Why does it always come back to Harvard? Anyway, we can move on to the Zorro Ranch now because this is in Stanley, New Mexico. Many people don't even know about this ranch in New Mexico. He has somewhere between 7,500 and 8,000 acres called Zorro Ranch, and it has a big house, of course, has an airstrip and a helipad. This ranch was much bigger than his island because the island is only like 70 acres. So this is like his biggest property. Lots of places to hide bodies or to conduct experiments. He had an underground structure. Maybe it was a bunker. Maybe it was used for eugenics, specifically transhumanism. And he talked about seeding the human race with his DNA. This was literally reported in the New York Times that he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. But like, didn't Elon Musk also talk about doing that as well? And that's why he's having so many kids, because he's so smart and he wants the rest. Like, anyway, not a Elon Musk episode. So Jeffrey Epstein attempted to integrate himself with Los Alamos National Laboratory scientists and transhumanist researchers. It's assumed that he was trying to leverage his ranch and wealth as a hub for experimentation and influence. And if you know anything about this laboratory, you know that I will be covering it in its own episode as well because it is wild. He was actively involved, obviously, in the Santa Fe Institute because his good friend Jell Mann helped found it. He was using his money and ranch to get more research done. I actually was wondering if that's kind of why he was like, hey, Los Alamos National Laboratory, we can do some experiments out here on my land that you might not be able to do in like a national laboratory. Let's do some things. Maybe that's also why he was so into scientists, because I keep coming back to so many questions. Like, why would he be interested in that? Was the question I just kept asking myself. I asked that question about theoretical physics, AI, gravity. Why are you interested in those things? The genetics thing makes sense to me, like his interest in eugenics and transhumanism. And like in this recording from Virginia Giuffre, which was released after her death, she did say that Bill Gates would come to the island and experiment on the kids. Like that was his thing. He wasn't, maybe sometimes he would partake in like the pedophile stuff, but mostly he was trying to experiment. And so, like the genetics thing, I'm like, okay, he was just being like even more fucked up. But gravity, physics, I have more questions about that. It just makes me wonder, like, what do they know that we don't know? What questions should we be asking for? Why was he and probably whoever he was working for slash with so interested in science? But that is a question I can't really answer for you. I can give you all the connections. I can tell you what he was funding. I don't know why. And I'm still working on it. It feels like no matter how deep I go into this rabbit hole, I'm just barely scratching the surface. Like every time I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all this I've uncovered. It's really not that much. And I still have so many more questions. Yes, next week we're going to get into the connections, like more connections outside of the science community of like trying to figure out who potentially could have been on Epstein's list because obviously they're not going to release it to us. But I find myself just asking more and more questions about Epstein, about this rabbit hole, about this spider web of people and things. And I don't think Epstein's the center. I think that Epstein's the center right now, and he's going to lead us to something more. We just have to find out what that is. And you know what's really interesting is while I am recording this episode, my Zoom, which is what I record on, it is just not working. So usually I use my phone as like a nice camera. My phone stopped working for no reason in particular. I tried to restart it. I could not use my phone camera. And then my Zoom literally shut down 3 times. It's like my computer is not malfunctioning. It has not been malfunctioning until just now when I tried to record this episode. And all of a sudden it does not want me to record it, which maybe it's conspiracy. Maybe my brain is so like in the conspiracy world that I'm like, everything's conspiracy. But I don't know. There's something weird about everything that's going on. There's something weird about obviously Jeffrey Epstein. We trying to find the why behind what the heck is going on. Something weird about like my recording, which maybe it's just me. But all in all, I'm digging into it. So until next week, my friends, stay skeptical and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.